All right, this is lesson 5.3. This is day 2 of it. We did day 1 previously, and now we're going to pick up just a little bit, 2 problems that are very, very tricky. All right, in day 1, we learned these sum and difference identities for cosine. And we learned that if I have the cosine of a plus b, my identity is cosine a, cosine b. And when there's a plus here, there's a minus here, so minus sine a, sine b. And similarly, we learned cosine a minus b is cosine cosine, then it becomes a plus sine sine. And we use these identities in the previous day, well, not for sine, but for cosine. I want something like the cosine of 15 degrees. Well, we don't know that on our chart, but we do know 45. We do know 30. And then we went through that identity to figure out what the cosine of 15 would be. Today I want to show you 2 more problems that use these same 2 identities, and they also involve one prior identity, so it's kind of a nice review. If you can put this all together, you will be in a very good spot. Okay, so here's the question. Find the cosine of s plus t and the cosine of s minus t if they tell you the cosine of s, then it might seem a little strange, but they tell you the sine of t. And so let's write out our cosine of s plus t identity. So cosine of s plus t, it goes cosine, cosine, and it goes minus sine, sine. And as we write out this identity, we realize to use this identity, we need to know 4 things. Cosine of s, we've got it. Cosine of t, we don't know that right now. Sine of s, we don't know that yet. Sine of t, we've got it. So they've told us 2 of the 4 things to use our identity. We have to figure out the other 2 of those things. So let's start, so let's just going to draw a line here. And we're going to come back to our original question. But let's start here with the cosine of s equals 3/5. We have the cosine of s. We do not have right here the sine of s. So now here's the review topic of this, or the review part of this. Do you know an identity with cosine and sine in it? And of course you do. Cosine squared plus sine squared, those are s's, equals 1. So let's put in cosine of s, 3/5. I'll square that. I'll get 9/25 plus sine squared of s equals 1. I'll subtract 9/25. So the sine squared, 1 minus 9/25 is 16/25. I'll take the square root. And you guys are thinking hopefully plus or minus, but look, we're in quadrant 1. So it's plus. So the sine of s is 4/5. So now we know one more thing that we were going to need for our identity. All right, similarly, and there's only 2 problems, which is kind of a bonus, but you can kind of tell now, oh, these get kind of long. Similarly, we don't know the cosine of t. They told us the sine of s, they told us the sine of t, and the sine of t was 5/13. So we'd try this again. So the sine of t equals 5/13. I wish I knew, and it's right up here, I wish I knew the cosine of t, but that's okay. I have an identity with sine and cosine, and now there's t's, so cosine squared of t plus sine squared of t equals 1. So a really nice review of what we've done previously. And I'll leave the cosine squared of t. I don't know what that is. Sine squared, I'll put in 5/13. I'll square it. 5 times 5 is 25. 13 times 13 is 169, equal to 1. Subtract 25 over 169 from both sides. So I get 1 minus 25 over 169. Get a common denominator. And you're going to get 144 over 169. How do you get rid of the square? Take the square root. And I get the cosine of t is 12 over 13, because 12 is the square root of 144, and 13 is the square root of 169. So I now have the cosine of t. I've got the sine of s. They gave me 2 parts of this problem initially to work with. They gave me the cosine of s and the sine of t, so I can come back to my identity and finally use it. So let's write this out. Cosine of s plus t, Give ourselves a little more space here. Still a little bit more. Cosine of s plus t. We wrote it initially just to kind of set this up, but now we'll write it and actually use it. Cosine s, cosine t, minus sine s, sine t. And now it's simply a matter of subbing in everything we know. What was the cosine of s? Look way up here at the beginning. Here's the cosine of s, 3/5. So I take out the cosine of s. I'll put in 3/5. What was the cosine of t? We had just calculated that right here. Cosine of t is 12/13 minus sine of s. We had just calculated that previously. Sine of s, right there, 4/5. Like I said, if you can follow this problem, you're going to do really well with this section. This is tricky as we can make this section. And sine of t, they've given that to us initially. Sine of t, look, it's right here. Sine of t is 5/13. All right, we sub all in. We got our 5/13. Fractions, let's multiply the top. So I get 36 over 65. Here I get 20 over 65. I already have a common denominator. That's kind of nice. Subtract them and I get 16 over 65. So the cosine of s plus t is 16 over 65. Very nice problem. Now let's go and look at the question again. If we look at this question, you might groan for a minute because, look, guys, there was two parts to the question. Find the cosine of s plus t. We still have to do part 2. Find the cosine of s minus t. So let's come back down and look at that, the cosine of s minus t. And hopefully as we're writing this, you're going to realize this part is a lot less work. We've done 95% of the work for this problem already. Let's look and see. What was the identity? It goes cosine, cosine. It goes plus, sine, sine. We already know all those values. It's the same as we had written right up here. Everything's the same, except now we have a little plus sign in here. So I'm going to get 36 over 65. That's the same, except now it's plus 20 over 65. And I add that up and I get 56 over 65. So the second part of the problem is a lot quicker than the first part. So cosine of s plus t, 60 over 65. Cosine of s minus t, 56 over 65. And that completes our first problem. The second problem is identical. It's a little bit messier because the square roots don't come out evenly, but it's really the same concept. And like I say, if you've got this concept down, you will be set for this section. Okay, let's try this one. Same question. They want to find the cosine of s plus t. And they want us to find the cosine of s minus t. That's the question that was written on the previous page, but it's the same question for this problem. All right, we know from a problem we just did, when they give me the cosine of s, which is negative 1/5, I want to find the sine of s. And so I know the cosine squared plus the sine squared equals 1. I'll sub in for cosine. I'll go 1/25, and negative times a negative is a positive, plus the sine squared equals 1. I'll subtract 1/25. So the sine squared is 24/25. And now I'll take the square root. So I get the sine of s, it's the square root of 24. The square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 24 I know is 4 times, 24 I know is 4 times 6. So I can write it 2 root 6 over 5. So a messier number. And you're thinking, wait, plus or minus? Guys, quadrant 2, a smart trig class. Quadrant 2, the sign is positive. All right, similarly, let's find the sine of t. So we've got the cosine of t, negative 3/5. We go through our cosine squared, plus sine squared. This one you can tell already. It's going to come out nicer, I hope. So I sub in negative 3/5 squared. I get 9/25. Here I've got my sine squared. That's equal to a 1. That looks a little sloppy over here. We'll fix that up. That equals a 1. Subtract it, and I get sine squared. 16/25. Take the square root. And look at that. The sine of t is 4/5. All right. On to our identities. So we've got the cosine of s plus t. So once you get a hang of this, they're all kind of similar. And like I say, it's combining a previous identity, which is good practice. So it goes cosine, cosine, minus sine, sine. Notice they gave us the two cosine ones initially. Oops, see if we can get up there and find it. So we have a negative 1/5 and a negative 3/5. Negative 1/5 and a negative 3/5. The two sines we had to calculate. Sine of s was 2√6/5. What a mess. And then we have a 4/5. 2√6/5. 2√6/5. And a 4/5. Okay, fractions, multiply the tops. Looks like a 3/25. Excuse me. Multiply the bottom. Or, I'm sorry. Then the same on the second fraction, multiply the top. I get 8√6/25. Now I can subtract, and I get 3 minus 8 square root of 6. The whole thing over 25. Not a real nice answer, but that's how it's done. Cosine of s plus t. Oh, sorry, cosine of s minus t. You guys know the shortcut now. We've got cosine. Cosine looks the same. Plus sine, sine. So everything follows identically, except there's a plus in there, so I'll have 3 plus 8 square root of 6 all over 25. So once I've done the first part, the second part goes much, much nicer and easier. All right, this will complete Chapter 5, Section 3. Now that we're done with this part of it, you should be able to complete the entire homework. We'll practice that tomorrow in class. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, circle the part that doesn't and come in tomorrow and ask that, and we will get that straightened out.